Some beautiful music for a beautiful day. Indeed. Welcome one and all to Talk Gaming episode 25. We're ready to go. And we're going to have a good time. Now, right off the bat, when I came over, I've been trying to set up a kind of schedule ahead of time so that people can see and set reminders for the live events that we do. It's kind of a neat thing that you can schedule live events so that people can set them so YouTube will notify them when it goes live, which is cool. But I did that, and I set the title to Everyone Hates Skyrim. And this is a reference to actually a trend that we're seeing. I'm going to see if I can pull up a particular meme that was going around. Now, this was a reference, of course, to Bethesda's press conference that they did at E3. Now, a lot of people had really strong reactions and feelings towards Bethesda's conference this past E3. And so we're going to look at this. I want to show you this. Okay, you ready? Are you ready for this? This is the meme that was all over the place. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but this is it. Sunday, 5,000 hours into Skyrim, and I'm still in awe of its beauty. And then by Monday, everyone was saying, why won't Skyrim die? And it was this really funny transition that happened so quickly. And I'm not sure why it all happened. Well, I think I know why it all happened, but it was pretty insane how quickly former fans, now at this point, at least that's how they feel, switched and turned on the developer that they previously said was one of the best in the business. And that was really surprising to me. And I think it's what happens when you take your fans for granted. Now, it's not to say I actually think Skyrim is a good game. I'm still baffled as to what is that one thing that makes it so great. A lot of people just say, like, well, the world is incredible, but that's such an easy cop-out. It doesn't actually explain why. Well, why is the world so impressive? Was it just impressive at the time? Was it that it was so big and vast and everything? Or is there something more to it? And I'm still wrestling with that question, and I've been wrestling with it because I am going to try to discuss and talk about it in a video. But it's a good game. But the developers have taken their audience for granted, and they are suffering the consequences for it. And that is in the form of their audience losing their minds and attacking them in every which way. Now, the reason or the way in which they did this and the way in which they kind of betrayed their fans' trust is number one, a lot of people, Bethesda has the worst luck in terms of hype. Like, for real, they have the worst luck in terms of hype. And I don't necessarily blame them for that. I don't think that they necessarily feed it directly themselves. I think they actually go to extreme lengths to try to not feed the hype and not talk about stuff when it isn't ready and not do that, just because this type of thing happens. So the fact that this crazy hype can happen with them not feeding it is pretty insane and crazy when you think about it. But the hype was built up that there was going to be a new space game revealed from Bethesda Game Studios, from Todd Howard's team, whatever it's called. I'm blanking on the name right now. StarCraft? No, not StarCraft. That's a thing. Let me know what the name of the game is. I'm blanking on it right now. Starfield, I think, is what it is. But that was rumored by a lot of different people to be announced this year, and it didn't ever happen. Of course, the presentation was 37.5 minutes long, and so a lot of people had very strong feelings towards it because it felt incomplete. But the same thing kind of happened year after year when Bethesda wouldn't announce anything or wouldn't confirm Fallout 4. And in 2015, they came out and they blew... Whoops, I hit a button. Oh, it's like my every note thing. In 2015, they blew everyone away, but in many ways, that extreme hype came back to bite them because a lot of people had unrealistic expectations for Fallout 4, myself included, and I'm willing to admit that. So when this year came around, people were expecting a repeat of 2015, that feeling of just being blown away by a huge surprise, like Fallout Shelter. We've been working on this game. It's available today. Fallout, you're going to get it in November. We're not doing this, announce it now and release it next fall. We're announcing it now. You can play it in a couple months. That's what people were expecting, and they didn't get it. So people feel a little betrayed. And even worse, the paid DLC now, or paid mods, which is in many ways micro DLC, and a lot of people haven't given this a fair shot, I think. I think it's important to clarify what exactly it is. So the paid mods is essentially they're paying people, like paying mod creators, famous people in the modding community, to work with them, and then they will own that mod, that piece of software, Bethesda will, and then Bethesda will put it up on their own sort of little marketplace that you can buy, and it's a sanctioned mod. They're calling it mods because people like mods for these games, but in reality it's just micro DLC that you're buying with credits. That's what it is. Just because they're hiring basically a freelance artist or modder to make it doesn't make it not micro DLC, which is what it is. It's microtransactions. It's little things. You pay 300 credits to get a new backpack. You pay 200 credits to get a new skin on your rifle. That's what it is. That's what it is. And that's another reason. So it's not straight pay DLC. The older modding community is still there, but that still upset people because they thought, well, you're turning into what we loved about Bethesda games was that you weren't doing this, was that you were going and creating single player experiences that didn't have all sorts of stupid DLC stuff crammed in every orifice. But now they're doing this. And so people were upset. And I think that that's a reasonable thing to be upset about. But it is just something I think you need to be fair about, because a lot of people were, in my opinion, unfairly bashing this new creation club. I think you can bash it. Go for it. I'm bashing it, but not because it's paid mods, because it's micro DLC. And I think that needs to be clarified. Other things, Doom VFR is $30. They're charging $60 for the VR for Fallout 4, and I believe also $60 for the VR for Skyrim, which blows my mind. They're literally reselling it. I was like, you know what? Release it as a free upgrade, or just a download, a patch that you can flick in the menus on or off. But no, it's its own thing, and they're charging full price for games that are 2 to 6 years old, just because you can put on a VR helmet. And I think that that's a little shady. I'm a little disappointed by that. And so are a lot of other people as well. And it's bizarre. Like I'm a fan of Mr. Matty Plays. I think he's got a pretty good channel. And I talked about him a fair bit in the past because I always go against Bethesda. He tends to side closer with them. And even he, after this whole debacle, he's been taking a more negative stance towards them as well. So they've pissed off their fan base, and that's a hard thing to come back from. It really, really is. That's what EA is struggling with now. That's what Ubisoft is struggling with now. And now Bethesda is going to be dealing with for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It's going to be a big thing. Ubisoft is still dealing with Assassin's Creed Unity from 2014. That just shows you the internet has a memory. They aren't going to let this slide. But anyway, yeah, bananas, BANANAS. Anyway, yeah, we just jumped right into that first little thing, and it's because I wanted to just get it out there, because I know a lot of people will probably click on this video, immediately hit the dislike, just because they're like, how dare he curseth the mighty beautiful Skyrim. And I think that it's important to clarify what we mean. It's a provocative title, but oh, we got a little loop back, but I thought, it can't hurt. But 86 people watching right now. That's wonderful. Thank you all for coming out. Who we got in the chat right now? We have Deathstroke, Rave Taco, Liam Shaw, 5x9, Tomer, Dimitri. Hey, it's Anthony. Hey, Anthony. Good to see you. Lisa is in here. P. Przemic? Is that what it is? Przemic? I'm sorry. I'm bad at pronouncing your name. We got Ethan Cahill, Jordan, Liam, as I said, Mud Crab Magistrate, which is awesome. Rave Taco, Totes Beast, Dodo. Yeah, Boss is in here. Arrival, Alex, Daniel, Igon. We got a lot of people in here. Thank you all for coming out. Mikla 345. Yeah, look at this. Brooklyn, Migu. It's so wonderful. Dan, howdy. Is that boy? We're gonna have a great time today. So as you can tell, new chair as well. This thing, I've never been a big believer in gaming chairs and gaming peripherals because they all are just colors. It's just, we made it red, buy it. We made it blue, buy it. And I'm guilty of it too. Like my mouse has LED stuff, but for like legitimate reasons. Let me see if I can show you. Like this has different modes. So if I'm general use is red, and then Premiere, I made the color match so I can change this. And this will change the little macro buttons that you can map to different things. And then if I'm in Photoshop, it's little blue, match the Photoshop icon. So I can actually switch around based on what application I'm using. That's cool. That's one application for gaming mice that I think is really underrated. Greatly improves my efficiency while editing. I love it. But gaming chairs, I've always been really hesitant with. I'm like, why would I buy a gaming chair when I could just buy a really nice office chair? So I decided to give a shot, and if this was horrible, then I would just return it and go about my business. But so far, I'm really, really impressed. Really, really impressed. Not only did this thing show up in a box that could literally be used as a casket for a Newfoundland, it's so heavy. The entire package is like, I think it's 60 pounds. It's like a 60-pound chair. It's a full steel frame, everything. I'm amazed at the build quality, and I understand why it's so expensive now. Whoops. So I'm enjoying it so far. I got to get used to having like actual support for my back and neck. It's nice. This was my old chair before that, and you see how it cut off right about at my shoulder blades. It's different to have support all the way up to your head, but I'm enjoying it so far. I'm enjoying it. Oh yes, let's see. There we go. We also have a Discord. If you're not on there already, then you definitely should before we get into the other topics we're going to get into today. If one of my mods could post a link to that in the chat, I'd greatly appreciate that. And we can just get into all of this and have discussions. We have a great time over on the Discord. We have some great mods that are in the chat right now, and it's always wonderful. Today, also, if I can get it out of its stupid little thing. Today also marks the launch of, I actually haven't opened this yet, ARMS on the Nintendo Switch. And I've always been very skeptical of this, but I decided I needed to get it because there isn't much else to play. This is the first time booting it up. Yeah, you can see the article we're going to talk about next in the reflection. Quick boot. Gotta love that. I played the little demo thing of this, and it was really, really fun. So, I mean, it's okay, but they're charging $60 for this thing. I'm not sure if it's worth it. Shut up. Shut up, Switch. I'm not sure if it's worth it. I love the Switch, but I have been having some minor technical weird things happen where just all of a sudden, like the right Joy-Con won't be paired and you can't turn it on. And so I have to like pop it in and out like 4 or 5 times and then it's fine. Or it goes in the dock, but it doesn't mount and charge. Like weird little stuff like that, but it ends up working. So I can't like really complain about it. So I don't know what to do about it. But yeah, that ARMS launched today, so I'll probably be playing that later. Much to the frustration of my close family members who want to spend time with me. But that's why I like you pull out the Joy-Con. You're like, hey, you want to play too? Then I'm being inclusive and I'm sharing. I'm not hogging and playing video games when we're supposed to be sharing time together. Also, one thing I do want to mention before we get into the other topics, I did or I am almost finished with my final full playthrough of of Blood and Wine. So I expect to work on that probably next. That'll be my next immediate video. The other video I was working on, my whole theory and thesis kind of fell apart as I was making it. So I decided not to put out something that I couldn't stand by or that had some holes in it. So I kind of trashed that, or put a pin in it, and we'll probably return to it later once I think through it again. But we're going to get that Blood and Wine DLC video made, and it's going to be much shorter. I'm going to try to do like 20-30 minutes, focus on, be very concise, not analyze every detail of the narrative in it, mention the important stuff, and just move on. Because that hour and 20-minute one for Hearts of Stone, I'm really glad I did it, because now I appreciate the narrative in that DLC so much more, way more than I did before, just because there was so much that I hadn't thought of or wasn't aware of, but now I can actually see all that because I had to read through all of the wiki pages and all of the character descriptions, all the little tidbits and notes that pop up when you're going through those to really try to understand what was going on. And it was great, but it's a ton of work. And for Hearts of Stone, which is a 20-hour plus DLC, that's just, for being a DLC, I think it's a little excessive. So what are you going to do? Yeah. We're going rapid fire with the Witcher vids, as Geralt says, just because we need, I think it's an old game. I want to get it out, get it done. A lot of people subscribe to see that. I want to give you what you were asking for, and then I can move on and not have that kind of hanging in the back of my head. Plus, I love The Witcher, so it gives me an excuse to play it. But, yes, we have coffee. This, if you can make your own coffee, I highly recommend this mixture. Cinnamon and white chocolate makes it taste like a cinnamon bun almost. It's really, really good. I figured it out, and I have not looked back since. Anyway, here we go. So the first thing that somebody actually did send in to me, I'm sorry if we're not going to get to the thing you sent in, but we'll do a Q&A as we get longer. Plus, I'm easily distracted, so I'll be looking at the chat and answering questions as we go through this. Another reason to watch live if you are watching this recorded after. So this is something that we've known for a while, but I thought it was important because ARMS launched today, and I thought that it was relevant and something interesting. So a Switch design flaw allows no backups, and Nintendo doesn't seem to care. So what they're talking about here is the fact that when you save your game on your Switch, in the back behind this little kickstand, there is a small spot right there. You can see it, the little red and gray. Small spot for an SD card, a micro SD card. And I have one in there right now. It used to be in my Galaxy S5, but then I got a Google Pixel that doesn't have expandable storage, so I just put it in my Switch where it's storing ARMS right now. And Mario Kart, I believe. And so that's where all of your save style or all of your games can be stored, but then your save files are stored on the Switch's onboard hardware, which is like 16 gigs of total stuff. Now, the issue with that is that if you were to, for instance, get a dud Switch, or if your Switch were to just die, maybe it's out in the rain somehow, it gets, you spill water on it, it fries, whatever happens, it's dead. All of your saves are gone. There's no backup to the cloud. There's nothing like that. I was amazed. I recently built a new PC, and so all of my games I had to re-download and reinstall because I sold the old computer to a friend of mine. And I downloaded all of these games from Steam, and I pulled them up, and I was like, crap, so I got to go all the way back through The Witcher to get up to the point where I could do like all these DLC. I mean, I'll enjoy it for sure, but it's going to take a while. And then I loaded it up after downloading it, and all of my saves, all the save files were there. From way back in like 2015 all the way through like the week before. I had all my save files there, and they were all recorded because Steam actually synced them up, and it was wonderful. I was very, very impressed, and that was true for all of my games. I love Civ 5, for instance. All of my save files, even the campaign that I've been playing off and on for the better part of like years at this point. That's still on there. Hearts of not Hearts of Stone. Hearts of Iron, is that what it is? Hearts of Iron 4. That one is also all of my save files, my conquest of Africa and Europe. That's all there. And it was really impressive. The Switch, which is a mobile device, which would make you think that of all the devices that would have cloud storage of some capacity, because they're so easily broken, this guy doesn't have it at all, which is really frustrating because it's a software issue. It's not a hardware issue, it's a software issue, which means it's something that Nintendo is willingly and knowingly not putting in, along with voice chat issues. For instance, like I'm sure many of you saw this horrendously designed voice chat thing. They have it so you have to go from your phone, which has an app on it, which is the voice chat, basically a kiddie version of Skype, and then you take the audio out. You plug it into an adapter that will combine the audio from the audio out jack in your Switch. They come together, and then it's one output that goes to your headphones, and then you can listen to that. And how they thought that that was a good idea baffles me, because they need both the game audio and the voice chat. You need the voice chat from your phone, the game audio from your Switch. You can't do it either way, or do it with one of them. So you're just a little screwed altogether. And the fact that the Switch can't handle voice chat apparently seems to be a wholly software related issue, and it's something that Nintendo is aware of but is not fixing it. And they didn't even mention it at E3 as far as I'm aware, which is really, really frustrating. It's really, really frustrating that they're aware of these issues, but they're knowingly going about their business and not doing anything about it. And that really kind of ticks me off, because the one thing that I cannot condone is when a company, whether it's gaming or another company, whatever, when they're aware of an issue and then they say, well, who cares? They're still going to buy our product. We don't need to bother with it. So let's just go about our business. As Geralt in the chat says, Nintendo doesn't care because Nintendrones don't rebel. Yeah, well, I think that's, again, going back to the Bethesda issue, for instance. I think that's another reason why Bethesda thought that they could get away with this, because their fans never rebel. They never do anything to stand up to the bad business practices. So they just kind of let it slide. And I don't think you can do that. And when the Bethesda fans stood up, and you even had one of the memeified YouTubers that's always defending Bethesda standing up and saying, come on, guys, this is crap. Like, this is garbage. That's bad. That's real, real bad. So they get what they deserve, really. Just like Ubisoft did, just like everybody did. You get what you deserve when you do that type of thing. And Nintendo, it's really frustrating. They're offering things that nobody else can do right now, which is why I'm hoping Microsoft or Sony revitalizes their mobile market. Because if you could end up with a revitalized Vita, for instance, you could have some really cool options out there. Even if you're just playing PS3 games on the go, that would be enough for most people. Or I'd say for pretty much everybody, because, I mean, think of it. You could play a port of GTA 5 on your little Vita. It's not that hard to create that powerful of a handheld device, especially when you look at like the new iPad Pro that they just had. $900 iPad Pro. It's more powerful than their $1,800 MacBook Pro, which is mind-blowing, but that's really impressive. That's what happens when you really work on your mobile tech and your mobile processors, and you get the really good APU, and that's just how you do. That's how we all do. And yes, if you're looking at the Witcher gameplay, I suck at hitting dummies on my horse, and my nose is ticklish, like just right there on the tip. I don't know why. I swear I haven't been doing crack. It's just ticklish. Anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. I hope Nintendo can get their act together, because I want to support them. I love the Switch as a device. It's really intuitive, and it really is a good device. I enjoy it, but I can't recommend it to people unless they're crazy Zelda fans, in which case they already have it, or if there's no other really way that I can recommend it, because there just aren't many games. Who knows? Maybe ARMS will convince me, and I'll be like, no, forget Zelda. Arms is the selling game right there. I mean, maybe, and again, maybe Mario Odyssey which was, I believe, IGN's game of the show. I think that might very well be a console seller for a lot of people. I'm not sold on it yet. But what else are you going to do? And plus, I'm not convinced, going back to the mobile thing with the $900 iPad, I'm not convinced that you have to keep a handheld cheap. You know, with a Switch, this guy has like a 3-hour battery life, which I'm actually willing to forgive because I don't tend to sit and do that very often where I'm playing on the go for 3 hours straight. I get why maybe people are going on a long road trip and they want to do that, but if you're doing that, you're better off just getting an AC adapter. You'll have one for your phone. You'll have one for other devices. Get a battery bank or something like that. They're really cheap on Amazon now. I could see that. Also, so I don't have an issue with the battery, but that was something that was held back because of the price. They were aiming for $300. Another thing, the screen is made of plastic. The screen is made of plastic. It scratches super, super easily. So a screen cover is basically required, which I got. And so all of this stuff, the display is only 720p, which frustrates a lot of people. It doesn't have built-in Bluetooth. I've heard a lot of reasons. I think it's just a cost measure. And all of these things were there and were cut because they wanted to get it in under $300. And it's pretty good deal for $300. But I would be just fine with paying $500-$600 instead of an Xbox One X if I could get a handheld that would allow me to play modern generation games on the go. And I don't think that Sony or Microsoft understands that that is a growing market. People love the idea of being able to play on the go. And I think that there's something there. Microsoft was doing all sorts of weird polls on their Twitter feed and also in private studies where they were asking people like, are you more likely to buy an Xbox console or to buy a Switch this holiday season? And like all the questions, half of the survey was all on the Switch, and it was a little weird, but they're like obsessed with it. So maybe Microsoft next E3 is going to come out with a handheld. Same with Sony. Maybe that's what they're doing, is they're going to revitalize the Vita, which I think would be a good bet, because I think the mobile market is a lot bigger than most people realize, which I'm okay with. I'm okay. I know I would buy it. I'm okay with paying more money for a better product, even if it's on the go. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to spend a good chunk of change. Just build it well so that it's not made of plastic and it won't fall apart. And support like cloud save, so if it breaks, then I can send it in for repairs and do that type of thing. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. Just get me a good device that I can be proud of and that I can play modern games with. Alexander Mayer says he just came here to say The Witcher is overrated. Well, that's fair. It's your opinion, bro. Some people love it, some people hate it, and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I was like, we just finished Life is Strange. Me and my girlfriend played through it. And I really enjoyed Life is Strange, but I know a large number of people that absolutely hate it because they don't feel that it's a video game. They feel like it's an interactive movie, which is in many ways its own genre now. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting. People have different tastes, and that's just fine. You might love Fallout 4 more than The Witcher 3, and that's fine. I think you're missing out, but that's fine. Do what you want to do. The other thing, Vampyr got some actual gameplay footage released that's not in pre-alpha. This is on the PS4, and this is from Don't Nod. This is from the same people that did Life is Strange, and it's the first thing we've really seen out of them. Now, this is alpha. So it's no longer pre-alpha, but it's still alpha. Some of the things in it, the camera angles are really clunky and weird, which is something that really wasn't an issue at all during Life is Strange. That actually was a really well done cinematic experience, but all of these camera angles look really clunky. But now we see what the game is actually probably going to look like when you're playing it, and it's been pretty evenly split as to what people like think about these types of games and whether they love it or hate it. In this case, having watched all of this gameplay, my opinion of Vampyr is that they have to do one thing, and it's pretty simple. They like all Don't Nod games tend to have one gimmick. They tend to have one thing which gets a lot of people really excited or interested and hooks them for the entire gameplay experience. Life is Strange, that hook was the time travel, the ability like to solve these puzzles by going backwards in time, changing decisions. And by the end of the game, you're doing these huge rewinds, years in some cases, going all the way back and changing the future. And then by the end, you have to kind of resolve the impact of all of those changes that you made. And so that was the gimmick, and then they pushed it. In this game, the gimmick seems to be, and this is another case, I don't think gimmick is necessarily a bad thing. In this case, the gimmick seems to be that you have this world that every NPC has a different little story that you can find out, and if you feed on them, basically, then you are going to get stronger yourself. But that person who has a story, who has other NPCs tied to them, is gone now, and there could be an impact. So one thing they showed last year, for instance, was the case of a father and a son, and this father was arguing with a shopkeeper, and you needed to kill one of them to absorb their blood, their power, whatever. And when you did that, one of the two, of course, would be dead, and that would have impact. So they said if you killed the shopkeep, the shop would close down, and then food would be less accessible. People could be more prone to getting the Spanish flu, which is what we're playing in the age of right now. Plus, also, you're dealing with, if you kill the father, all of a sudden a little boy is fatherless, and then that could have impact later on when that guy doesn't have a dad and gets into some trouble. So it's just, it's going to be interesting because they have to pull off that gimmick. This is Vampyr for people. Liam Darji is asking. Yeah, Vampyr. So this is the one thing they have to do. They just have to pull off the gimmick, and it has to be so good that people are willing to play through an entire game for it. Because the graphics are not exceptional. The lip sync and the animations, as far as I can tell, are not exceptional. The combat is not exceptional. All of that is good enough, probably. Good enough. As you can see, I think the health bars, I hate health bars. I usually have issues with most heads-up displays. I think that, like, for instance, this one, why is the green, yellow, and red bars in the top left so big? I'm glad they don't have a mini-map. I hate mini-maps, but why are those so big? Those could be half the size squished, and it would be just as good. It would work just fine. But, nonetheless, all of this is just good enough, and so if they're able to really sell that gimmick, then it could really excel. But they have to sell that gimmick, and so far, it's one of the games that you can't tell until you've played it if the gimmick is good. Just like with Life is Strange, somebody describes that game to you, and you're like, I don't know if that would make a good game. I mean, it sounds cool, but I'm not sure if it'd be a good game. I mean, going back in time, like, left trigger, oh, you rewound it, now you got to go and make a different decision. And it's something that I think you'll just have to experience, which is why it's important to find somebody that you respect, or a YouTuber who you relate to in terms of opinions of games, and see what they think of a game like this or Life is Strange, and make your buying decisions based on that. Because it's a matter of taste a lot of the time with these types of games. So let's answer a couple questions now. I'm done with that. Yeah, no, when somebody offers you communion, that's a little creepy. Just walk in their house, would you like communion? Oh, so Ruben Sousa says, do you have any plans to stream more frequently in the future? Not just podcasts, but games too. Yes, the Twitch link is right up in the top middle of the screen. I'm going to start going there. I found a way. I didn't realize how powerful my new PC is. The i7 7700K with right now a 1070 Founders Edition. and, you know, 2 SSDs. I got a 4 terabyte Barracuda. Like, it's a monster. Water cooled. It's a beast. I didn't realize how powerful it was. So what I'm able to do is I can live stream to Twitch in 1080p while also recording the gameplay. Like, normally streaming to Twitch in 1080p is like 4,000 megabits per second, or megabits per second. And so it's not that high quality. And if you were to try to use that in a YouTube video, it would look pretty terrible. But what I realized is that I can also record it at the same time in like 30,000 megabits per second to 40,000 without skipping a beat or dropping a single frame in game. And so what I'm actually going to be able to do is when I'm working on these critiques, if I'm doing a critique of Black Flag, or if I'm doing a critique of Vampyr, for instance, I'm actually able to play through it on stream and then also be recording the gameplay in a very high quality format while we're going through it. So I don't need to do it twice, which is what we're going to be doing. And it's good. I'm enjoying it. It's pretty good. Mythbusters, are you going to be talking about Detroit Become Human? That game looked interesting from E3. That game looked really interesting. I mean, it's another one of those very narrative games. Again, in the same new genre as Life is Strange, for instance. Or what was that game that had... I can't remember the name of it. It was a year or two ago, and it had all these effects where they had like 25-minute cutscenes. It was trying to merge TV and video games, and it had all these like screen distortion effects that made it look like it was glitching out or artifacting, but it was part of the game. So a lot of people thought that their version of the game was broken. I can't remember. I can't remember what it was called. I don't know. I can't remember what it was called. Vampyr. Yeah, no, it looks interesting. It looks interesting. Detroit looks really interesting. Beyond Two Souls, yeah, I think that's what it was. That might be it. Quantum Break. That's what it was. That's the game I was thinking of. Thank you guys. Quantum Break. You guys all are jumping on it. There's a slight delay. There's a delay of like 20 seconds maybe. And Quantum Break is what it is. Wonderful. Quantum Break. So if I pop back over here. So like those, I mean, it's a new genre. It's a new genre entirely. And that's really, really cool. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Like my brothers hate those types of narrative games. They don't understand it. Like if I want to do that, I'll watch a movie. If I want to play a video game, I'll play Madden, or I'll go and do like, I'll play Dark Souls or something. And I can understand that point of view, but it is a new genre and a new type of media altogether. It's bizarre, but it's one of the cool things that we're living in now. We're living in the future where all of a sudden your TV is becoming interactive. Your movies are becoming interactive. Video games aren't just video games anymore. It's very, very broad. Very, very broad. And it's kind of awesome. I'm enjoying it. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll look at it, and I mean, it seems like a good game to stream. Maybe those interactive ones. I'm not sure how long it'll be. My guess is that's like a 6-7 hour type of game. But I'll just have to see when we get there. Let's see. Joshua Gallagher says, Luke, what do you think of The Evil Within 2? Will you play it on stream or the channel? Well, The Evil Within 2, I mean, yeah, I like horror games. I think it's something that you really have to do it right. I thought Outlast 2 was horrendous and just, it wasn't a good game. It was just trying to be gross. It's like, I've said this many times, I think they honestly just had everyone in the office come in, write down on a piece of paper the most disgusting, vile thing they could think of, and then they drew them out of a hat and put those in the game. And it was disappointing because I loved the first Outlast, but luckily we had Resident Evil 7 to come and counterbalance it. Which was wonderful, and I love Resident Evil 7. If you'd like to see a critique of that, let me know. But as for The Evil Within 2, I didn't play the first one, so I don't have a lot of reference. If I were to play the second one and do like a critique on it, I'd want to play the first one as well. But overall, I think it's intriguing. It's intriguing. That trailer they showed where the guy's just swimming in Elmer's glue looked interesting. But I don't know what to say about it. Again, when we get closer, I'll look into it, see what the demand is. This fall is going to be very, very busy as well. I'm going to school full time, studying business, and then also trying to run the channel at the same time, and also working almost full-time, not quite full-time. So it's going to be busy, but I think we can do it. Jonathan Brown says, Lukapoo, do you think the animations and interactions in Vampyr are a bit stiff and clunky looking? Looking at something like Mass Effect Andromeda, isn't that something that should be pointed out? It absolutely should be. It absolutely should be. And animations in general, again, like people, every game has its issues. Every single product that's ever been put out has its issues. But the difficulty or the miracle and magic of video game publishing is that you want your audience to be so impressed by what you're giving them that they're willing to forgive you for those shortcomings. The Witcher 3 has a lot of clunkiness because it's a massive open world game, and massive open world games, whether you're talking a Skyrim, a Fallout, or a Witcher, for instance, you're dealing with potential for massive glitches. And even now, there's still glitches that I found while playing through The Witcher fairly regularly. Small ones, but they're still there. So people see those, but they're willing to forgive the company for those because the rest of the game is so impressive, or because they like the previous stuff the developer did, or because whatever the reason is. So the developer has to give the customer a reason to forgive them for those mistakes. Life is Strange, I just played it through with my girlfriend, as I said, but Life is Strange, we hit an entire sequence near the end of the game, and like the final most critical moment where Max, the main character, her mouth wouldn't move, her lips wouldn't move. Her face was locked. Only her eyebrows were moving with the animation. We were playing on PS4, but we had this glitch where everything down here, the bones and the animation just weren't moving. So dead face from the eyebrows down. And it was really like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But the overall game experience was so good that that's not what I think of when I think of Life is Strange. The problem with Mass Effect Andromeda was that was the most memorable thing about the game, was how terrible the facial animations were. And that's a problem. When that's the most memorable thing about your game is the facial animations, you've done something terrible. And your game just is garbage and you don't deserve any credit. So it's, I think with Vampyr specifically, as I said, if they can pull off the gimmick, people will be willing to forgive the lame combat, the weird graphics, the lack of lip syncing, camera angle problems, potential for glitches, which is pretty normal for Don't Nod. All of these things they'll be willing to forgive because they like what the developer did with the rest of the game. But if they don't pull it off, people will bash them for terrible graphics, for having glitches galore, for having terrible combat, and it'll be a running trend. Same thing with Unity. The rest of the game wasn't good enough for most people in order to forgive the glitches, so even now that's the defining factor. Yeah, Deathstroke says maybe her face was tired. That wasn't a glitch, Luke. Yeah, no, Life is Strange has some pretty terrible facial animations. Like, so bad. Way worse. Lip syncing is the worst I've ever seen. They don't even have the excuse of saying that, oh, it's originally in Japan, so it just doesn't link up. No, it's just terribly done. So, like, the mouths just go like this. There's no pronunciation. It looks like a cartoon. It's horrible, but you're willing to forgive it because the narrative is so interesting, and that's what they're going to have to do. As for Anthem, I know a lot of people were asking about Anthem as well. Again, I'll believe it when I see it. EA and specifically BioWare has done so much to lose my trust. I'm not gonna give them any credit potentially for making something interesting. It's a Destiny competitor, no doubt. It looks like the game they wanted to make when they were making Andromeda, but as of right now, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it, and I don't think we're seeing that game for a very, very long time. I really don't. On the other hand, Assassin's Creed Origins. Last week's episode, we didn't have anything to talk about really with this game. We knew that it was set in Egypt. The reason I was hesitant to call it Assassin's Creed Origins, as the leak from Comic Book World or comicbook.com said, was because other things in that article were also ended up being erroneous. So as we see here, you're playing a character named Björk, and in that leak where they said that it was going to be called Origins, they said that you were also going to be playing two characters like Jacob and Evie Fry from Syndicate. You weren't going to play as one person, which now we know is false. But there's some really interesting things in this gameplay that I find impressive. Look at the bow or the arrows in his quiver. If you see, they rattle around as he runs. That's a little attention to detail thing. You see how they're rattling back and forth in the little tube? I would do the hand motion. See that? They're rattling. The arrows are rattling. Yeah, that's going to be clipped. That's great. But like, there's a little attention to detail things that I've noticed while watching this gameplay that I haven't seen a lot of other people call out. And I think it's really impressive. And hopefully it's indicative of an increase in care, basically. Now, I think they still have probably rushed this game out a little bit. These games are so massive and so expensive to make. I'm sure that this is a game that they could work on for a decade and still have work to do. But as of right now, it's looking pretty decent. Some people have complained about the combat, which is honestly, it's just hard to tell. I can't tell what I think of it, because as for most combat systems, you have to get a feel for it yourself. Mass Effect Andromeda, a lot of people were complaining about the soft cover, how there wasn't a dedicated cover button, how it was just contextual. If you leant up against a wall, then the character would crouch there. But once, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound great. But once I got my hands on it, I actually liked that whole system. And I thought it worked pretty well. But as with most combat systems, I think you just have to try it to see what it's like. And for Assassin's Creed, I don't think it's any different. The fact that they've changed it, I think, means that we should probably, give it a chance, because clearly they've worked on it. It's more gear-based, which a lot of people were upset about, but at the same time, I know I've complained about gear-based systems before. I even complained about The Witcher 3's gear-based system. The fact that every, half hour, it feels like you have to switch around your swords just to get, because you found and looted another great one that's better than the one you have, and so you got to change it up and you got to constantly switch it up. That got a little excessive for me, so I complained about that because I'm a complainer. But this, they're actually adding a new gear-based system, meaning that your gear has levels, your gear has a damage output, so you can actually build a character as you want it based on like spears and distance fighting, or close up. If you get like dual swords, then you can do that. And so in that case, that I would view that as an improvement. Now, once I get my hands on it, I might go, this is terrible, this is horrible, but we'll just have to see. Altogether, it looks really interesting and intriguing. The animations seem much better and much improved, but I am concerned that we haven't seen any city environments. We haven't seen him running through Alexandria. I would like to see that, because I want to see the number of people that they can draw. We saw a little clipping in a rock right there. We do have to remember that this is, after all, in alpha, but there is still some clipping through rocks and stuff that is a little concerning. Some pop in, specifically with boats on the water. For whatever reason, they pop in a lot there. But it does seem like they're trying to do something different on the whole, which I will support, because they need to change it. And if this just means that this game, that Origins, is really clunky, but at least they're changing stuff, I'll be like, you know what? The game itself isn't great, but I can see where they're moving with it, and the next entry is probably great. Horizon Zero Dawn, I didn't think was a very good game. I thought it was an impressive, like, one giant, the more I've thought about it too, the more I've come to this conclusion. I think Horizon Zero Dawn was basically one giant tech demo. like a ginormous tech demo, and that was setting up a sequel that's going to be the actual game. And I'm excited for that game. I think Horizon Zero Dawn 2, whatever it is, or Horizon 1 Dawn, maybe that's what they'll do. Whatever the sequel ends up being called, I think that could have the potential to be really, really impressive. But as it stands, I thought it was a little repetitive and dry. And if that's what Origins turns into, I'll be a little bummed out because I think it's a waste of a setting. Egypt being a pretty incredible setting to go to. But if it ends up being like, well, we're going to Rome next, then I'll be like, okay, I can understand. I can kind of live with this. Daniel and Is That Boy says, Lukey Poo, didn't Ubisoft say they would that they demand all their games to have an alpha at least a year before release? That is true. I believe it was their CFO or someone, chief operating officer maybe, said that they needed, from now on, or here on out, Ubisoft was going to have their games release 1 year after alpha, or at least that was the minimum that they were looking at. Now that can mean a lot. Alpha, basically, depending on your company, can mean a lot of different things. Alpha can mean that, okay, we have all the systems and we're in an alpha, so most of the game is basically in place. Maybe we still have some quests that we're adding, but the main story is basically built. You have the skeleton and like the first coat of paint on it, but it's by no means finished. A game will usually go through like 4 or 5 alpha builds, at least from the studios that I'm aware of. They'll go through like 5 alphas, and then they'll go through like 3 or 4 betas, and then they get to their final version. So if they're talking the first alpha, Alpha 1, a year before release, then that doesn't mean a whole lot because the first alpha is still very early on in development. If they're saying that, well, our Alpha 5, our final alpha needs to be, a year out from release, then that could be much, much better. And it just depends on the studio. Every studio handles these things a little bit different. And that's part of having a company. Of course, you're going to approach these things a little differently. But the main issues that I seem to have from at least watching this, one, they seem to have Michael J. Fox playing these games. I don't know why they give it to people that can't control joysticks. Like, if you look at it, they're like, what are you doing? You gave it to the one person in the room that couldn't play the game. You let them play this alpha build of this highly anticipated game. You're stupid. So maybe that's concerning. But it's frustrating because you can't actually see. You give it to some dude who's never played a video game before, apparently, and then you're like surprised that people are confused about your combat system. Well, no, you gave it to somebody who has like some sort of disability in their thumbs. They can't hit buttons, apparently. So it's a little frustrating to watch that combat system be just brutalized by those mongrels, but they're doing that. But like, look at this cutscene, for instance. This is for a side quest. This is where you see the Witcher 3 inspirations. The developers have said many times that they took and wanted to make side quests much more narrative and Witcher 3-esque, and you can see it here. You see how it's got the cinematic camera angles. They employ depth of field, which is something that for whatever reason Assassin's Creed has always been really bad at, like really, really, really bad at. And I'm not entirely sure why, but they're just really bad at handling it properly. So that's interesting, but the main issues seem to be that they gave the combat system to incompetent people. So I haven't gotten a feeling of like, oh, well, that's somebody who can fight in video games, but they're just struggling because the combat system is bad. I can't tell if it's the combat system that has issues or if it's the person trying to play the combat system, but either way, something is off. The other thing is that, of course, the rocks, there seems to be a lot of clipping through rocks, which is a little concerning. And of course, the most obvious thing that maybe people aren't referencing is how spread out the world is. Now, they purposely, if you haven't seen the map, you got to Google a picture of it in another tab if you can. It's all of Egypt. They're giving you all of Egypt. So you can go all the way up through the Nile. You can go to Thebes. You can go to modern day Cairo. You can go all the way up into the Mediterranean. They're giving you all of that space to play in. This demo that they were showing off is in a very, very small section of the map. So I'm hoping that this is one of the more dry areas and that they're saving the really good stuff for the actual release. I'm hoping that's what it is. But if the entire game is this spread out, then it's going to be dry. It's going to be a dry experience. It's just, yeah, you're going to need to get some lube because it's going to be damn dry, and that's going to be frustrating. But let's see. I kind of started talking a lot. I'm sorry. Daniel Schuju says, my ex-crush couldn't even move the camera and move at the same time on a controller. Yeah, that sounds like a deal breaker. No, it is funny how somebody who doesn't play video games, the idea of moving like two joysticks is like so foreign. It's like, I don't know how to do it. But I do the same. I look at somebody playing the piano and I'm just like, how do you, like my left hand while I'm doing some with my right hand. But then you think about it, you do the same thing when you're typing. When you're typing, you're doing two different things with your hands. It's like muscle memory. It's something that you train yourself to do. It's just weird. Hands are weird. Hands are weird. That's something that we can agree on. Jonathan Brown says, have you ever played a pen and paper RPG? That is a good question. I've done, I wouldn't say like actually from start to finish. I wouldn't call it like an actual RPG. We tried, me and some friends tried to do Dungeons and Dragons, but it was like the guy that was like the dungeon master or whatever, he didn't really know what he was talking about. It was just weird. It wasn't like, I don't know. It was like playing an alpha build of it. It just wasn't very good. So I know that wasn't what it actually is. But I've always wanted to try something like that, or to try Cyberpunk, which is, of course, what is inspiring Cyberpunk 2077. That could be really fun. I got to figure out. I've never done it before, so I don't even know how to really get started with that. I think you got to have somebody that knows the game already and then have them do it. But it seems interesting. Is That Boy says, Luke, please notice the last night question was a while ago. If you could send it again, I would appreciate it. That way I can look at it. Oh, last night. Let me see. I pulled it up on Steam and I'm looking at it. Is this the one where when it was announced at E3, there was like the guy kept being really weird and awkward, and he was like, I sent some tweets that were really terrible and embarrassing, but I don't apologize for them. That's not who I am. And then the guy was like, oh, okay. So tell us about your game. He was totally unrelated. I can't remember. I think that's the game. But I don't know. Boss Sturwold says, I wonder if when you enter a city, you get a loading screen in Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm assuming that is, I mean, my guess would be no. Just because in the modern day with modern hardware, you're dealing with devices that have 8 gigs of RAM. For your mainline consoles, and for like the X and the Pro, for instance, you're dealing with much more than that, depending on the console. But I mean, for any system that's playing these games, you're looking at 8 gigs of RAM. So there's really no excuse for having a loading screen before you go into a city. Draw distances and loading in geometry really isn't a big deal anymore. If you look at New Vegas, for instance, New Vegas was a game that really struggled with this. The original New Vegas strip was supposed to be basically one giant cube in the middle and surrounded by all sorts of roads that intersected it and went across it. It was going to be like a giant complicated hashtag of roads. It was going to be a full city. But what they realized when they started developing it for the 360 and PS3 was like 512 megs, I think is what those consoles had in RAM. So the idea of loading in an entire city was just insane. Like, there's no way we could do it. Plus the GPUs they had, VRAM was tiny, minuscule. And so now with 8 gigs of RAM, it's much easier to do those bigger scale set pieces, which you can see in all sorts of games that have been able to do it. I think Fallout 4 was able to do it without load screens. The Witcher 3 was able to do it without load screens. So I'd be shocked if they need load screens. Yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Geralt asks, when do you expect more Last of Us 2 stuffs? I think we'll get it during PSX. Let me pull up a tweet. It's a dangerous thing for me to say, right? Because I got a tweet, or I saw one and I retweeted it. I believe that I actually thought perfectly explained kind of my perspective on all this. Let me see. I'm looking for it. It was from... Where is it? Where did it go? I don't see it. I'll just look it up. It's from Neil Druckmann. And if you aren't aware of him, he's the one that created and directed The Last of Us. Plus, he also he was like the creative director for Uncharted 4 as well. Let's see, what's the date for these? Maybe he deleted the tweet. He might have deleted the tweet. That might be why I'm not finding it. Let's see. Yep, I think he deleted it. Yeah, looks like it's gone. Yeah, no, he deleted it. That's weird. So what I was looking at, let me pull this up so I can show you. What I was looking at is this right here. This is Neil Druckmann. I'm sorry that took so long. I was trying to find it, but I was like, did he get rid of it? This is bizarre. This is, look at this variety of who to follow. Polygon, like the crazy liberal kind of social justice gaming publication. Alex Jones, which is like the antithesis of that, and then Hamilton. Like weird suggestions. Anyway, it was right after, I remember when I pulled it up and retweeted it. It was right after he tweeted another killer show, Sony props, and then a bunch of you reminding me, and then he just skips. So he apparently just deleted the tweet. I mean, unless he replied to himself in it, but it doesn't look like he did that either. So, yeah, he deleted the tweet for whatever reason. But basically what he said was that he was sad that he couldn't actually go and share more of it, but it was the Lost Legacy's turn in the spotlight, which was a little strange to me because I would think that they could coexist, assuming that The Last of Us Part 2 is a ways out, but apparently they didn't think so. Plus, I just wish they had shown a better game than The Lost Legacy. I've never liked Nadine at all. I think she's ham-fisted. I think they're trying too hard. And as for Chloe, I think she should have died in Uncharted 2, which I think was the game that she's in. I always get 2 and 3 mixed up, but I think she should have died in that game. Anyway, that's just one man's opinion, I suppose. And let's see. Let's just do a couple more questions. Cassie G says, Luke B, what is your opinion on the Shadow of the Colossus remake that has been announced? I never played the original, so I'm excited to try it and to give it a shot. Lord knows I'm open to it. And it would give me an excuse to play it and critique it, do a video on it. It would be wonderful, and I'm excited for that. I don't have much to say other than I'm happy to see that it's happening, because I know a lot of people have been waiting a long time for something along these lines, so I'm all for it. Mythbuster says, what is the one trend or gimmick or mechanic that you wish developers would stop putting in their games? Minimaps. No doubt. Minimaps. They're terrible. There's no reason you should have a mini-map in your video game. Like, no reason at all. And we're seeing that developers, I've been saying this for like a while, but we're seeing developers actually change it. You see, Assassin's Creed doesn't have it anymore. Far Cry isn't going to have a mini-map, apparently. Developers, at least Ubisoft, is learning, and they're getting rid of them because they realize that when you should be looking at the gameplay, when you should be looking in the middle of the screen where the action is happening, people are drifting their eyes down to the left to the minimap, and they're losing themselves just following little dots on a mini map, and they're wasting their own time doing it. And it's just such an unfortunate thing because they can develop and build these great worlds, and then it goes to waste because nobody's looking at it because they're stuck staring at a minimap. I mean, the best solution to me would be to somehow build a game like in Zelda where you can just turn off the minimap entirely and still play and still have a good time. The unfortunate reality is that most games nowadays are so dependent on minimaps that the NPC will say, oh, here, I've put the coordinate on this map, take it, and then it adds it to your minimap, and then you just follow it there. Because when they're writing the game, they don't know what the map is going to look like. They don't know what the directions to that place are going to be. It's one of my favorite things about The Witcher 3 is that you can play through that game for the most part, and with some exceptions, but you can play through that game with the minimap off, and if you listen to what the NPC says, like in Blood and Wine, they say, oh, well, this guy has a house near the port with a red door. You can go through the port and look, there's only one house with a red door, and you can find where he's talking about, instead of just following a direct mini-map point, which pulls me out, pulls everyone out when they're doing that. So I would say mini-maps, terrible. Get rid of them. Awful. And I would be willing to make an exception for maybe like a shooter, but for open world games, there's no reason they should be there. They pull people out. Exactly, Roger. They make you a zombie. They make you a zombie. Geralt says, Luki, have you played Alien Isolation? Want another one? I mean, I would like more of any scary game. I think that it's a genre that you can either do really, really well, or you can go off the deep end and you end up with an Outlast 2. And I mean, I think the more we get, the more I think horror games have an important place in gaming, because horror movies are always disconnected. And so there's always an element of, well, this is just a game, whatever. But at the same time, when you're playing a horror game, like horror movies, they're disconnected. When you're playing a horror game, you're in it, you're part of it. When you're playing Resident Evil 7, they're talking to you, you're making the decisions, you're doing all this, and that has a much deeper impact. And so I think they're important. I would be up to one. But let's see. Anything else? Let's see. We'll finish with this. Daniel Schuju asks, Lukipu, do you think that consoles can get back to their former glory of being the new standard of hardware instead of being that outdated garbage we got in this gen? Well, I think the difficulty is just that they're moving forward, especially Xbox is changing the way they approach. So is Sony, apparently. They're changing the way they approach consoles in general. They're not approaching generationally different consoles. They're looking at it in terms of just updating, like the iPhone in some ways, but not even like that. They want it, I guess, the iPhone in like a software way, maybe, or Android in a software way, where they have Xbox and you can play Xbox games on an Xbox console. But if you want a better Xbox console, then you have to spend more to get the better version of it. The problem with that is that the games are always going to be limited by the lowest and the weakest chain, right? If you yoke two yaks, you're only going to walk as fast as the slowest yak. That's all that's going to happen. So when you have the Xbox One, that's the slowest one in the generation, which the original Xbox One is the weakest of the Xbox One, PS4, then that's what the standard is. That's what companies have to be able to get running on, right? because Xbox doesn't want any exclusives for just the X or just the Pro and on Sony's side, and that can hold them back a lot. I understand why they want to avoid that, because it can frustrate a lot of consumers because they buy a console and then 6 months later there's a new one out that's better. But that's always been true. If you buy an iPhone 7 right before the 8 comes out, like 3 weeks before, and then you're shocked that the new one just came out, that's because you're not an informed consumer. So I understand why they're doing it, but I think it holds back the games in general. I think we might see a new generation entirely. Eventually, for sure, they'd have to back out and say, okay, now we're moving on. Xbox One is no longer supported. This is an Xbox One X exclusive. The problem has just been that they refuse to do that. And it's kind of frustrating that that's what we're dealing with. But that's for whatever reason. I'm sure they have some master plan, but right now they're insistent on having no exclusives within their family of consoles, and I think it's holding them back. Crackdown 3 looks kind of terrible, and all of the gimmicks, the gimmick being destructible environments, being able to demolish skyscrapers, that was really interesting, but apparently they couldn't get it running, so they didn't show any of it at E3. They just showed some terrible gunfighting stuff that looks like Saints Row on low. It's terrible. I think that game could have been well served if they had just said, okay, we're going to have it be an Xbox One X exclusive. You can only play it on the X, and we're going to take full advantage of the increased hardware. I'd be fine with that. You probably end up getting more people to play if you could get that skyscraper destruction working, but apparently they can't. But what else are you going to do? I mean, that's just the dealio. Marcel, I know I said that was the last one. I'm terrible. Marcel says, have you tried any VR stuff? Any opinions? I did try a demo of the HTC Vive. They had it at a GameStop for a little while, and so I actually got to try the demo that they normally would show off at E3, and it was really impressive. I really enjoyed it. I was shocked at the build quality of the controllers. Nice metal finish, and it's like really, really good. It's heavy. It's got weight. The headset was pretty comfortable and worked really, really smoothly. I just don't know what games you could port on it, and I think, again, it's probably more of a gimmick than anything else, but if you have the right games for a gimmick, the gimmick works. Just like with the Wii Sports, that worked. The only difficulty is just finding a way to communicate that gimmick or employ that gimmick into something useful. The Switch has the Joy-Con detachable controllers, the ability to go anywhere and play anywhere. That's a cool gimmick, and some games are employing that properly. The VR stuff, I'm just not sure how you do it. I don't know what to do. But anyway, let's rapid fire. Banana 9000, favorite game ever? Crap, probably The Witcher 3. I'd say. I don't think that's a shocker, but I love that. It's either The Witcher 3 or Bloodborne. Love both of those games. Can you imagine Microsoft canceling Crackdown 3? I actually could imagine. I can picture it. Because apparently, like, the IGN people, who are notoriously easy on all games, they're like, oh yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty ugly. It's a pretty ugly game. It's not nice to look at. Luckily, it's kind of fun, but the one thing that was supposed to sell it was destructible environments, and it's not even there. So, yeah, it's not looking great. When they say it's not looking great, you're in trouble. So I could totally see them canceling it. And if that happens, they better push Sea of Thieves, because they're going to need some sort of exclusive to save them. How do you like Origins? It looks really interesting, but again, I want to see more. I want to see bigger set pieces. But either way, I'm going to buy it. I got this in the mail. Game Informer, kind of a rubbish magazine, very poor gaming journalism, but just because this has an exclusive interview with some of the game developers, it's really interesting to look at. It leaked like a week before E3, but still nice to have a copy of it. Yeah, Icky's Pop says Microsoft just can't help but name things moronically. I don't know what they're thinking. Xbox One X, it's just not, it doesn't roll off the tongue. Xbox One, I guess that works, but Xbox One X, it's clunky. It's clunky in my mouth. That's what she said. Kamuru Tetsu says, will people still be playing VR next gen? I'm sure, but it's going to still be a gimmicky thing, and I don't think it's going to get widespread support. I think, if anything, it'll be something that, like Bethesda's doing now for Fallout and for Skyrim, they'll port their old games and support VR, but I don't think it's going to get a lot of dedicated AAA games for it. It just doesn't seem to be... people just don't seem to be that into it. Plus, the cost of entry is so high. With the Vive, it's like $600-$700 plus a really strong PC. Same with the Oculus. I mean, you're talking about a huge investment to get it working. The PSVR is interesting, and the fact that you can play like Resident Evil 7 on that is impressive. But still, you're talking $400 as a barrier to entry. So it's expensive. It's expensive. I can't talk apparently. Wesley Payne, what do you think of black female soldiers in Call of Duty World War II? Also, they're Germans. And did you know they're centering swastikas and not even calling Nazis Nazis or Germans, and instead they're Axis? I'm not surprised. Everyone in... it's actually surprised me. Everybody, there's two big factions in gaming, it seems. For the most part, there's some exceptions. There's a lot of people in the middle, but for the most part, you have the far left, the people on like the Polygon that are all for censoring. And like Nadine is their hero from Uncharted 4 because they want this sort of, like strong, empowered woman. Yeah. And they're willing to get a bad game, the sort of Anita Sarkeesian type of content, which is rubbish on many different accounts, not even just politically, but it's just poorly made content. But that's one side of it. And then on the other side, you have the sort of stereotypical gamer in the public sphere, which is somebody who trolls, who's just playing video games. They don't want to talk politics. They just want to have a good time. But if you attack their games, they're coming for you. They don't care about your politics, but they're going to come after you for attacking the thing that they love, which is understandable. And those factions are constantly at odds. After Gamergate, they were at odds more than ever, and I think they're going to continue to be at odds. And it's really frustrating to see that they're going to put black female German soldiers in the Axis. It's just frustrating, and I think it insults the legacy of the people that fought and died in there. If you're going to try to tell a story, then you should tell the story. You shouldn't try to make up your own because it makes you feel better about feminism or something. Like, we all want equality, but at some point you have to respect the historical reality of what happened, and what happened was horrible and terrible, and to joke around seemingly and goof off with altering history, I find insulting. Anyway, so let's see, I lost it. Okay. Nikos Dragopoulos. I can't talk. Anyway, Nikos, glad to see you here, buddy. Do you want Watch Dogs 1, Aiden Pierce, to get a sequel, or Watch Dogs 2? I don't know the name of the black guy. Sorry for my English. I'm Greek. You're fine. I can understand what you're saying. So do I want to follow up to the character in the first game or follow up to the character in the second game? I never finished the second game. I never finished the first, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think the fact that the main character from Watch Dogs 2, you can't even remember his name. I think that says a lot about how well that character was written. I think it was written terribly. Even just from what I played, I could kind of see that. It was kind of a fun game, but it wasn't written well, and it wasn't sympathetic. It was like what a bunch of 30-year-old people in Canada think punk hipsters are like, and it was really cringy. And so I probably prefer a new one from the first guy, probably the former. But anyway, yeah, so let's stop there. I'm gonna keep going if I'm not careful, but yeah, we got a lot of interesting stuff out. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Talk Gaming. I know it usually devolves into just a giant Q&A, but I know I've always wanted, like, my favorite YouTubers to do more Q&As. And I know the day is probably going to come when I'm not able to read through all the comments or respond to everybody because there's too many people commenting and I can't keep up with it. And I want to be able to do that now and give you guys the chance to interact with me. I want to interact with you, and so I appreciate it. I did that thing where, like, you inhale your own throat. It was weird. Anyway, Yeah, no, I had a great time. We got some good talks in. We upset some Bethesda fans, but what else? What else are you gonna do on a typical Friday? I don't know, but I want you guys to have a great weekend. Let me know what you're playing. If you're watching this recorded after, let me know what you're playing. I'm gonna try ARMS here in a minute. We're gonna see how that runs. Follow me on Twitter at Luke Stevens TV, again linked right above my head, to find out what I think of that, and join the Discord if we could get. Yeah, we got Deathstroke giving a link in there. So join the Discord if you haven't already, and we'll all be in there talking together, and we'll have a great time. I'm excited. But great job, everybody. Great questions. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video, which hopefully should be out sometime next week once I'm done with Blood and Wine. I'm excited. See you then. Bye-bye.